Welcome to our guide on basic pallet rack terminology and measuring techniques. Today we are going to go over what I have standing behind me is known as pallet rack. This is considered one bay of pallet rack. One bay is the space between two vertical standing uprights. We have our pallet rack upright frame. This is our vertical standing piece. This is what connects the horizontal pieces known as the beams. The beams can make the bay of the upright, so again, left to right. And then we have our wire deck, which is sitting on top of our beams. The wire decks are great for pallets to prevent any fall through below. And then they also have the channels welded to the wire deck frame, which act as a support for your pallets when the pallets are placed on top of the beams. So we've got our pallet rack upright, our pallet rack beam, and our wire deck. These are your three essential pieces. Now let's get into measuring these items. So our pallet rack beam, you're gonna see a clip on the outside of the beam. What I want you to measure is inside of the clip to inside of the clip. So I'm gonna take my tape measure and I'm gonna place it on the inside of the beam and drag it across where you see we have a 96-inch wide pallet rack beam. From here, this is where we will determine the capacity needed for the beams. You will take your tape measure and you're gonna measure the top to bottom of the beam. This is a 4-inch beam, and pretty industry standard, a 4-inch beam is gonna range around a 5,000 pound capacity. Different manufacturers use different steel gauges, so that can vary from beam to beam. The smaller the beam face height, the less capacity, the larger, the more capacity. And then as the beam gets wider, the capacity is gonna change slightly as well. So we have 5,000 pounds, and that's per pair of beams. So front and back beam is gonna get you 5,000 pound capacity for this load. Then you have your wire deck. A standard 3-channel wire deck, you can see the 1, 2, 3 channels is gonna be a 2,500 pound capacity. Again, different manufacturers, different steel gauges, those can vary from deck to deck, but typically 2,500 pounds, and that is weight evenly distributed. So when I say weight evenly distributed, I mean the pallet being dispersed over across the entire wire deck, not center of the wire deck. You will still see the wire deck give a little if you have the blunt of the weight in the middle. So back to our beams. Your beams are what is made to hold the weight of your pallet. We want to make sure the pallet is evenly distributed front and back of the beam. Next, we have our pallet rack uprights. So to measure these uprights, we're going to measure outside of the frame to outside of the frame. So again, I'm going to take my tape measure on the outside to outside, and you can see I have a 48-inch deep upright frame. To measure the height of the frame, we're gonna go from top to bottom. This is a 10-foot tall upright. They're a little bit easier to measure when they're lying down than when they're standing vertically. The capacity of these frames are also gonna differ from the manufacturer. This is known as a Mechalux frame. This is their 314 frame. So this is a 20,000 pound capacity frame, and the upright frame capacities range as well. They are based on a 48-inch beam spacing. So 48 inches is gonna get you 20,000 pounds for this frame. The wider the beams are separated, the less capacity the frame will have. The narrower the beams are spaced, the more capacity the frame will have. And again, I will include a chart at the end of this for the basic Interlake Mechalux frames. Every upright frame is going to have 2 holes on the foot plate. We are going to place 1 4.5-inch anchor bolt through those plates. There is 2 holes on each plate because when we anchor through one hole, if you hit a rebar, the other hole is there as a secondary option. And if for any reason we were to have damage to the upright frame or the anchor bolt, you have an additional hole to place an anchor bolt in. So 1 anchor bolt per upright foot plate to secure your uprights to the ground. The wire decks are going to be the same depth as the upright on 9 out of 10 cases. So this wire deck I will need a 48-inch deep wire deck to fit my 48-inch deep upright. And again, measuring the wire decks is as simple as the outside to outside measurement. And then the wire decks are going to vary in the width depending on how wide of a beam you have. A standard 96-inch beam, otherwise known as 8 foot, is going to have a 46-inch wire deck. We need 2 wire decks per beam level on 8-foot, 9, and 10-foot beams. When it comes time to 12-foot beams, that is when we will have 3 wire decks per beam level, where you will also get 3 pallet positions per beam level. Here you will have 2 pallet positions. Thanks for tuning in to our basic pallet rack terminology. I hope you learned something helpful today, and be sure to subscribe to our channel to stay up to date on all things pallet rack.